I have been waiting over a year for these two locomotives to come in. These are ScaleTrains Operator Series N-Scale GE Tier 4 GEVOs, and we are going to open them up today and stick some DCC in them. I pre-ordered these things back in December of 2021, and I can't tell you how excited I am to have them here. Now, the reason they took so long is really just supply chain issues and semiconductor issues and all of those things, which are just affecting a ton of things. We're not going to get into that. The important thing is that they are here. Now, these are ScaleTrains Operator Series locomotives. They have several tiers of locomotive quality in terms of detail and everything, and Operator is their lowest tier. Now, that doesn't mean anything. These are still fantastic locomotives, and they still have the same working innards as the higher tier locomotives, which are rivet counter, and if you have HO scale, you have museum quality. So we're going to get these things opened up and we're going to put some DCC in them. And you'll notice that I have two locomotives, and one of them we're just going to put regular DCC in, and one of them we're going to put sound in. Let's get started. There is just something about opening up a locomotive that is just awesome. When you open this up, you get some additional detail parts that you will need to install in a small baggie on the side, and the locomotive is encased in a plastic shell. I remove the foam protectors from the handrails and begin to install the extra detail parts on the locomotive. Now, there's no instructions for this, but it was pretty straightforward. Now, I purchased these DCC ready, which means that the next thing to do was to take the shells off and install decoders. To remove the shell, you'll need to remove the two screws that hold the couplers onto the locomotive. Then you remove the couplers and carefully remove the shell. You will notice that I'm using my magnetic tray here so that I won't lose any of these super tiny screws. The shell comes off easily and we can see the inner workings. The decoder installs here. This locomotive uses a decoder with a Next 18 connector. These things are seriously tiny, and they're also pretty easy to install. All you have to do is remove the dummy plug and plug in the decoder. Now, the decoder I'm using here is from NCE, and it's a pretty basic function decoder. The manufacturers that make Next 18 decoders right now that I know of are NCE, ESU, and Soundtrax. So all you have to do with these is pop them into their socket, reinstall the shell, and you are ready to go. Now, like I said, I did purchase two of these locomotives, so I need to install DCC in the second one. So this one, I'm going to install some sound. Everything up to the installation is exactly the same. You install the details, remove the couplers, and expose the inner workings. This is where things get a little different. ScaleTrains have a feature that, frankly, I wish more manufacturers would adopt for those of us who like to install our own stuff. The bottom of the metal chassis has a place for a sugar cube speaker, and it also has places for the wires to be run in the chassis without having to do any drilling or milling whatsoever. For this install, I will be using a Soundtrax TSU N18 digital sound decoder. This decoder is slightly larger than the non-sound version that I'm using in the other one, but it's still super tiny. So I go ahead and pop the decoder in. I did find that after I put it in, using a little Kapton tape to secure it helps a ton. Now, for the sound install, I picked up this small 11 by 15 millimeter sugar cube speaker that fits perfectly, and I got it shipping and everything off of eBay for less than $10. Now, it's not wired, so we're going to have to add some wires to it. I'm going to use some 30 gauge wire for the speakers, and I solder them onto the two little connections of the speaker first. Next, I need to feed them through the wire holes and hooks in the chassis and attach them to the circuit board that is on the locomotive. To do this, you're going to solder the two ends of the wires to these pads. It doesn't matter which wire goes where as long as they are attached. Next, I need to test it and make sure before I put everything back on the locomotive. And before I fire this thing up, I did make a bit of a boo-boo here. And some of you with a keen ear will notice the difference. I did not read all the way through the description of the product when I bought the decoder, and I bought an EMD sound decoder and not a GE sound decoder. It's not a huge deal, and it still sounds great. I'll probably just leave it as it is for now, and I'll probably save up and buy the correct sound decoder at some point and swap it out, which is super simple thanks to the Next 18 connector. All right, let's crank this locomotive up. The sound sounds fantastic. Now it's time to put everything back together. Now when I was doing this, I did find that some Kapton tape securing the wires that I had to run for the speakers does help out a lot, not only with a secure install, but also with the ease of replacing the shell on the locomotive. Now that we've got everything back together, let's run through some of the sounds of this Soundtrack's TSU N18 decoder. Those are my two brand new ScaleTrains Operator Tier 4 Gevos. I love them. They have DCC in them. They are running great. Now, I have two of them. And last week I did a build of an Arduino speed matching tool. So that means that next week I could speed match these things. And that's exactly what I'm going to do. So next week we're going to speed match these things and make them into a matched pair. Thank you guys so much for watching. Until next time, I'm Jimmy from the DIY and Digital. Stay safe, be kind, and happy railroading.